This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 130 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Now, regular listeners will know that when I hit these special episodes, every 10 episodes, I do something a bit different. And today I've got a really special interview that I'm really excited to share. Many of you will know Brooke McAlary from the Slow Home podcast, and those of you who've been listening to the Thoughtful Travel Podcast for a long time will know that Brooke is very special to this podcast, because without her, I don't think it would have started up. So back nearly 3 years ago when I started the Thoughtful Travel Podcast, I started it to be part of Brooke's Jackrabbit FM network, which doesn't exist anymore. But without that initial help and amazing support for the first year or so, I highly doubt that this podcast would ever have really got off the ground. Brooke held my hand through all the tricky bits. So it was very timely for me to be able to chat with her again. But especially because she's been overseas for a year now. So she's an Aussie like me, but has spent about 12 months or a bit more so far spending time in Canada with her family, her husband Ben and their 2 kids, who are I think around nearly 8 and nearly 10. And as well as spending time kind of doing some slow travel in Canada, they also spent 4 months travelling around North America at a much faster pace on a book tour to promote Brooke's book Slow. So I was very excited when Brooke agreed to catch up for a proper in-depth chat about this, long-term travel experience, and I will bring you that chat just in a moment. It's a really lovely one. I just even thoroughly enjoyed listening back to it and really loved chatting to Brooke. She's a very like-minded traveller and also very thoughtful. So, what else can you want on the Thoughtful Travel Podcast? So in a second, you'll get to hear more about Brooke McAlary on slow family travel and nomadic life. But before that, I have to say a very big thank you to this month's sponsor, Scrubber. So last week I told you about my experiences with the Scrubber wash bag, which I've used for some years, but Scrubber also has a bunch of other products, and I picked out a couple that I particularly like the look of. They have the Scrubber Stealth Pack. It's a bit bigger than the wash bag. It's got backpack straps, and as well as being either a wash bag or a day pack, you can even use it as an outdoor shower. True stealth, hey? I guess that's where it gets its name. And I was also impressed to see the Scrubber Air Sleeve, which is a sleeve for tablets or laptops, but it seems quite genius. It auto-inflates so that your device gets kind of a protective cushioning of air, and you can even over-inflate it by blowing some extra air in yourself if you need a lot of protection. I'm thinking like a really, really bumpy, desert road in a rickshaw or something, but even when you over-inflate it, you can even use it as a travel pillow. So they're very clever over at Scrubber, and if you use the discount code Amanda15, you can get 15% off. So I recommend heading to thescrubber.com, that's the SCRUBBA.com, and checking out what they've got. And on that note, it's time to head over to my wonderful conversation. Well, I thought it was wonderful, and I hope you do too, with the delightful Brooke McAlary. We cover all kinds of topics related to travelling slowly, to long-term travel, being away from home, and family travel especially. So Brooke and I had a pretty similar background in that in our early to mid-20s, we lived overseas for some time. She in Canada and me in Asia and Europe. But those experiences overseas taught us so much. And I was really curious to hear about what it's like to do that kind of in our next phase of life as parents, and to see what it's done, how it's helped out her kids. And we don't just talk about family, we talk about slow travel, re-entry shock, which they will have to endure soon. They're coming back sometime this year, and lots of things in between. So I hope that you thoroughly enjoy this chat with Brooke McAlary. So, Brooke, you have been away from home for about 12 months now, right?
Yeah, just a little bit over a year. Yeah.
So,
which sounds both a long time and not long at all.
Yeah, like I mean, I remember when you were or when you decided and announced that you guys were off for a year, or for at least a year, and spending a long stint in North America. And I was like, oh, so envious. And now it feels to me like you've been there kind of forever. But can we go back to the decision point? So you're around my age, you've got young kids. It's not like when we were younger and we just took off to live abroad and didn't really have any plans about it. So it's a bigger and much more different decision. So can you explain a little bit about what went into that decision?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. And I think that was a realization that we had to come to at some point before we bought tickets and, headed off. It's like, this is not like gap year 2.0 as much as we kind of call it that. It's not the same level of non-responsibility. So we've got two kids there. They're almost 10 and 8 now, but at the time they're a little younger. And so, I mean, even just things like, okay, what do we do for schooling? What do we do for employment? My husband and I are both self-employed. So how do we make that work while we're traveling through completely different time zones, particularly for my husband who has Australian clients. So, we had to really kind of model what our life would look like when we were traveling through North America and see if it was feasible. Will we have the capacity to do a good job of schooling for our kids? Will Ben be able to, service his clients in the same way that they're used to while being on the opposite side of the world? And they were like those kind of practical questions were what we really needed to answer before we got into the exciting stuff of, booking flights and looking at where we want to spend time and what we'd like our year to kind of unfold like. So that sort of stuff was, I felt like a grown up.
I was just going to say exactly that. It's very adult, isn't it? So, right. I mean, you and Ben spent time living abroad when you were younger, like I did, right? And I imagine back in those days you kind of took off with no definite plan and then you just stayed and, then you eventually came home, right?
Exactly. So we were in Canada. That was our end of uni kind of backpacking trip. We saved for a few years and headed off. Didn't have a job. We had the right visa to get a job, but we didn't have a job. We kind of turned up in Banff one day and Ben's brother had been there previously. He's like, yeah, I think I've got a job that you guys can do. And we ended up being lifties at a ski resort in the Rockies. Had never seen snow before.
Oh, wow, really? Oh, I kind of imagined you'd always been a kind of a snow person. Oh, my gosh.
Nope, never seen snow before. So they're like, you can snowboard, right? We're like, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we got this.
My goodness, I didn't know that. I thought, you grew up in the east coast of Australia, much closer to snow than me. You'd probably had some experience, but no, interesting.
I'd seen like a couple of patches of icy snow on the side of the road when I was a kid. That was it.
But it obviously suited you. And obviously that was part of you, deciding to go back as well, right?
Exactly. So we did, when we left Canada 15 years ago, we did not think that we would ever be able to come back. It's so far and so expensive and, who knows what life held. But we were lucky enough to come back when 2014 we had a white Christmas, and that really reminded us about how much we love Canada. We love the Rockies particularly. And that was sort of I think I'd always had this kind of pipe dream of traveling nomadically and working, remotely without ever having any reality behind it. And I think that 2014 trip really kicked into high gear my desire to do that. Unfortunately, at the time, we didn't have any capability of doing that. My husband was still employed by, he worked in corporate, and I was kind of doing very piecemeal stuff that was certainly not going to kind of allow us to travel for any length of time. So, yeah, I think it was then 5 years really or 4 years of figuring out how to make that work, in terms of all the things that I already spoke about.
Yeah. I think for many, well, probably the vast majority of people, those things just feel too insurmountable, and so they don't think about it too hard. But perhaps, can you speak to how those things have worked out? Like, I vaguely remember hearing on the podcast, Ben works at some, unholy, awful hour sometimes to chat with Australian clients and things like that. So, how's that worked out for Ben, and how's it worked out for the kids with their schooling?
Yeah, it's been a really interesting learning curve.
I see.
Across the board. So what I will say first up is that Ben has coped in a way, and not only coped, he has really thrived working in a way that I just could not work, being who I am. But essentially, he works Australian Eastern business hours. So for us, depending on what time zone we're in here, that is usually starting work at around 3 p.m. and finishing somewhere around 11 p.m.
Wow.
And that's okay here. But when we were on the east coast of the States, that was really tough. So that was getting up, sort of staying up till 2 a.m.
And still being able to think at that hour.
Exactly.
Whoa.
And that was when we were road tripping as well. So we'd get up and we'd drive 6 or 8 hours some days, and he'd turn around and do it every day. So, I mean, my hat is forever off to him in the way that he has done that. And the amazing thing is that his clients are happy, and he's kind of delivered everything that he needs to plus. So in that way, that has been, I mean, and I'm certainly not complaining about it. Well, I'm not, because I don't have to do it. But, a year in, and the novelty factor has certainly worn off. But it has meant that we're able to structure our days so that when the kids are in school, we get up, we do a few hours of school, and we can go and explore, or we can go and ski, or we can structure our week so that we take a day extra off. And it sort of frees up our days to really maximize the place that we're in. And then Ben comes home, and I do dinner and bed, and he works. So that it's certainly got its benefits living like that. But I do think that there are times when it takes its toll, of course. Of course,
yeah. And I think for one, I don't think I could cope. I couldn't work those kind of hours. I'm not a night person, for example. But I guess, there's lots of possibilities, and I'm glad for you that Ben's able to do that. That works out really perfectly. And I love that you're probably getting, really good chunk of family time each day, because I imagine that's one of the huge benefits of being away altogether like that for so long.
It is. And that was one of the first things that we really, I mean, it's kind of obvious when you say it, but after about a month of traveling together, Ben and I were like, it's just the four of us, all the time. And it was wonderful, but kind of also confronting is the wrong word, but you're used to having all of these sort of inputs and outlets in your life that sometimes I feel like they're taking away from family time, but other times I feel like the kids are benefiting from time with friends or social time at school and things like that. And it was a kind of something we had to really get used to, was like not having that, and everything that the kids get from extended family and their group of friends and all of their extracurricular activities, that was stuff that they were getting from time with us. And I've really come to cherish that. But it's honestly something that I hadn't given a huge amount of thought to before we left. And it was, intense almost for the first couple
but
of
it's worked out, right?
Absolutely. It's been incredible. And I think that, there's so many things, and because we're still traveling at the moment, I don't think I've unpacked a quarter of everything that we've sort of learned and absorbed over the year. But that time together as a family and getting to see the kids in a completely, in a whole group of different ways, seeing them learning, seeing them challenge themselves, seeing them, in uncomfortable situations that they allow themselves to grow into, and seeing the blossoming of their personalities and all of these incredible things that I just don't think I would have seen in such detail if we had spent this past year at home. It's been such an incredible privilege.
Yeah, what a gift. It's funny, isn't it? Because as you talk, I'm thinking, I love the trips I take with my son, but I feel like he needs, time with his friends and time at school and stuff. But then I think back to when I was, about your kid's age, so I was 9, and we had 6 months in Europe in a camper van, in a very small camper van, my mum and my dad and my sister and I, and, we didn't see anyone else for months and months at a time. And we completely adapted to it. Like, I never thought, back then, we couldn't email our friends or anything. We had, we sent some aerograms, to a few of our friends, and, we had really no contact. But that was fine. I remember we used to, we played endless games of poker and rummy and other various gambling kind of card games every night.
Right.
And, we just, that was the new normal. And I think kids adapt to that. And
That's
it's okay.
one of the things I've been amazing to see is how adaptable they are. And and we're much the same. We've discovered the joy of board games this year. And just I love it. There's some of the things that I cherish the most, and just spending time going for a walk together, or it's a different kind of togetherness.
Yeah.
And it's been interesting. You were talking about kind of being cut off in terms of communication from family and friends for a time. And I think the assumption was certainly from us, but also from family and friends, would be that we were kind of FaceTiming all the time and emailing all the time. And I set up the kids' email accounts so that they could keep in touch with their friends. And we haven't done that nearly as much as I thought we would. I mean, obviously we stay in touch with family, but even that is kind of, we'll talk to Ben's family once every 3 or 4 weeks. We'll talk to my family once every 3 or 4 weeks. I haven't had many conversations with my sisters or anything like that. It's and I certainly didn't do that on purpose, but I think it has been kind of the desire to say, all right, well, we've taken the leap to do this. Let's do this. Let's kind of wind things back. 15 years ago, Ben and I didn't have mobile phones, for example, when we were traveling. So we might have payphone called our parents once a month, once every 2 months, to let them know we're alive. And I feel like it's sort of tapping back into that, kind of almost eschewing the whole instant gratification of modern technology. And it's been really interesting.
Yeah, there's some definite benefits to that. Like, I often think it's a pity. I mean, thank goodness for the internet because of all that it brings us. But, I do remember back in, when I was living in Japan or in Europe, and especially in Japan, it was 2001. To get email, I would go to an internet cafe maybe once a week. And, and that would be great. And I'd, send a couple of emails, be in touch. And at some stage I got a mobile phone, and I remember, my parents would call me, maybe once every couple of months because it was really expensive.
Yes.
But then it's really special when you talk. And now, we travel, and, I'll send my mum pictures every day of what we're up to. And I don't think it's quite as special. And I do, maybe I'm just old and nostalgic, but I really miss those days. So I can appreciate how you've kind of, come to that, to be not in too close contact.
Yeah. And it's been really wonderful to have the opportunity to miss people.
Yes,
if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
To
really, and I think that when we do go home, it will have impacted our relationships, not just with the four of us, but with our family as well. My sisters, my parents, Ben's family, because I think having that opportunity to miss people really does call your attention to, how much you love them and how much you appreciate them. And it's kind of easy sometimes to take that for granted.
Yes, it is, and much too easy these days to be in really close contact, almost just automatically without really thinking, without deciding I really want to talk to Brooke today, but it's just, talk to Brooke because I do it every day kind of thing. So
exactly. And don't get me wrong. I mean, I think modern communication technology is amazing.
Me too, obviously.
I use social media like everyone else, all that kind of stuff. But I just think to not necessarily continue those patterns that I'd fallen into previously has been an unexpected gift.
Yeah.
To really get the opportunity to miss people and to have perspective on our relationships and how much they mean to me. And
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually wanted to ask you, along those lines, what else has been, unexpected or not, something different from what you anticipated about being away, about your long-term travel?
Yeah, it's interesting. I tried to go into it with limited expectations, just because I know from my own experiences, when I go into things with expectations, it doesn't end well. I think expectations, because invariably things either don't stack up in a good way or they don't stack up in a bad way, and expectations kind of lead us to feeling discontent. Even without reason to. So I tried to go into it with limited expectations, which is hard to do, of course, when you're trying to imagine what such a change will look like. But one of the things that has surprised me is everyone kind of told me before we went, you're going to get so sick of traveling. And 12 months in, and I didn't get sick of traveling.
Yay!
The only thing I think that has surprised me with how much I I guess my experience of it has changed over the past 12 months, is booking accommodation. I used to love booking accommodation. Absolutely loved it. But, we've been on the move like a lot. And even though we're in a period now where we're a bit more settled, the book tour period, which was in the middle of the year, we're on the road consistently for 4 months. That was just an exercise in perseverance.
That would have been, chaotic in terms of booking for sure.
Right.
Like, you're kind of on the road on the move every couple of days or so, right?
We were. We had 2 periods where we were in a city for a week at a time. We spent a week in Maine, on the coast of Maine, and that, I think for that reason, plus Maine's awesome, was one of my highlights, simply because we felt like we could stay put for more than a couple of days. And I don't mind. I like quick travel. I like, quick trips in terms of taking just a couple of days. But when it's just
a lot of them
consistently on the move.
Yeah.
And, just sifting through Airbnb and VRBO, and then, figuring out that some places don't have any Airbnbs, and staying in hotels, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So that was something that has surprised me, that my enjoyment of booking accommodation does have its limits.
That is a shame, but I'm sure over time it will return when you're not having to book so much. So, yeah.
Exactly. And we kind of tried to stay ahead by a month. That was sort of, so that we didn't, I'm all for spontaneity, but when we had such a stretch of travel, and it was a big ask of Ben and the kids and myself to really have, a bit of certainty, made a huge difference.
And you had, book events and stuff, didn't you, that you had to work around? So you have to be pretty organised to get that all working out. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So, that's sort of something funny that surprised me. But one of the other things that has really surprised me was that, as someone, I really am shocked to have learnt how much routine gives me a sense of place, because
it's really annoying, isn't it?
It is annoying, because I always kind of prided myself on, it's cool, we can, do this, do that. We've got a different rhythm to every day. And I still maintain that to a certain extent. But when you don't have many certainties, I mean, none of us really do, but when you don't have many concrete certainties, like where you're living or any of that kind of stuff, having that grounding sense of routine has actually really brought me a lot of peace when there wasn't a lot to go around. Even just figuring out that, yes, I do operate better if I get up in the morning before everyone else and have a cup of tea just for 10 minutes, journal a little bit, have a quiet moment, and then I'm good to go. And that has been great, actually, too. So I think that so many of the things that we're learning about ourselves will be instrumental in life after this trip, in figuring out what that's going to look like for us. We've kind of got a running list that Ben and I talk about a lot, about what we want life to look like when we get back to Australia. It's really, this year has really informed a lot of that.
Well, I think I know in my own experience, travel is always such a moment to really learn more about yourself, because you're in such different situations, and from being at home and you're out of that routine. And I always find I learn a lot about myself. And I think to be able to do this longer term travel, at our age, compared to, traveling in your, early 20s or so, I think you're probably more aware, you're probably just more ready to learn a lot more things about, what you want out of life, or how you want to live your life, and all of those things. So I'm a little bit envious, actually, that you've had this chance, because I think it would do me good to do the same thing. Can you give us a bit of a taste of some of the things that you've, kind of learnt that you want to take back to, so-called real life?
Yeah, I think the things that there's a lot of things that we've realised we don't want.
Right.
In terms of, the kind of environment we would like to live in. We were really tossing up when we left. Okay, so when we come back, maybe we'll be looking at inner city living, apartment living, or a small townhouse, because we really value a slower, simpler kind of pace. But up until we left, I really thought that for us that might have been living in a suburb, maybe of Sydney. Or on the other side of the spectrum, there was, okay, well, maybe we live in the country. And we were kind of thinking it would be one of the two. And having spent a bit of time in cities, I just don't know that that's where we're going to settle. I think that we'll be looking for more. I mean, I've spent so much time in nature and so much time surrounded by even just trees and green to know that that's where all four of us,
function better,
live well. Yeah, exactly. And so I think that, that's one of the big things in terms of the environment we're going to live in. But also just the scope. I don't know. I'm really kind of focused on what life will feel like rather than what it looks like. It's kind of a vague answer. So what I've loved about this year is, what I mentioned before, that we have had time to kind of just be the four of us. We have had space in our days for things like going for a walk or, playing board games. And that has meant that things like, technology have taken a huge backseat and, extracurricular activities that haven't been any because it's just the four of us, and kind of really thinking through what we want our day-to-day life to look like when we get back. And I think we're just going to strip it way back and see how that feels once we've started to put down roots somewhere. And I think that that to me is more what slow living looks like these days. It's carving out space for slow, and kind of defending those boundaries, living a normal modern life elsewhere, but kind of defending those boundaries around space for family.
Right. Yeah. That's wonderful. And I think it's important to learn that in a really kind of, what's the word, like a solid way, like from such an in-depth experience abroad, because otherwise it's so easy just to get caught up in the routine, and the kids' friends are doing this extracurricular activity and this one, and so they want to do it too, and suddenly you're quickly busy again. But if you kind of really learnt that actually we function really fine without all that stuff, so let's see if we can do it without that stuff, then that's a big lesson, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And kind of going into it just with intention, just with really mindfully saying, this is why we're saying no to all of these for the first 6 months. This is why, we're carving out this space for us. This is why. And again, trying not to attach expectations to what that will or won't or should or shouldn't look like, and just seeing, this whole year has been an experiment. An experiment in what would it be like to not have a home base? What would it feel like to work completely, remotely? And we're still learning. We're still figuring out all of that. But that theme, that thread of experimentation is something that I want to keep throughout life once we do go back to Australia. Because I think there's something really liberating in saying, okay, well, what would happen if? And then doing the thing. Yeah,
I love all your, I know you talk on the podcast quite often and run these, short-term experiments. And to me, they've always seemed akin to traveling. It's something that you do for a short time and you act in a different way or, try on a different habit. And I think, I really, really embrace that kind of idea. Now, we talked a couple of years ago about slow travel, and I wonder now that you've been away for this year, and some of it was very slow travel, and obviously parts of it, like your book tour, were not very slow travel. But what do you feel you've learnt about slow travel and the right balance, and any lessons about slow travel, I suppose?
Yeah, I think that slow travel really can be both of those things. But obviously it's easier to have a sense of slow when you have a month in one place, of course, because you can get to know what the town that you're staying in is like, and go to the library and go to the grocery store and just kind of put down temporary roots. And for me, that is what slow travel kind of always looked like in its most
pure sort of form.
Yeah, exactly. Knowing, of course, that that's not the reality for the vast majority of us, the vast majority of time that we travel. So the book tour was really interesting because it forced me to figure out ways to find slowness in amongst a much busier schedule than I would. Like I probably
usually
would have taken the book tour. Exactly. I would have taken the book tour itinerary and stretched it out over 12 months. And that would have been more, more akin to the pace that I like to travel. But that wasn't
not very practical.
Exactly. I don't think my publisher would have been pleased with that. So, it was kind of tapping into moments of slow in spite of the fastness that surrounds us. And sometimes that was as simple as making a cup of coffee and sitting out the front, on the front step of wherever we were staying for 5 minutes in the morning, or even just journaling. I journaled a lot while we were on the book tour. Pretty much every morning I would wake up and I would write a handful of pages. It usually just talking about what we'd done the day before, but sometimes it was, emotional stuff I was going through or ideas that I was having, whatever. I don't ever put, limitations on what I journal. And
just what comes out.
Exactly. But the other thing that really has fascinated me is photography. I've always liked taking photos, but looking back now, I'm so grateful for all the photos I have taken over the past 12 months, because I think when we are moving at a pace that is fast, we don't always tap into our memory making systems, as well as we do when we're traveling slow. And I think photography has helped me enormously with that, because I've kind of created this habit of taking photos of little details, or just of trees or of, grass or plants or sky, not necessarily touristy snaps. And that has helped me a lot, I think, in cultivating that sense of spaciousness, even when things felt really busy. But the other thing that I have done, saying touristy kind of snapshots, is I've taken more photos of myself and my family. And I'm so grateful for having done that.
Yes.
Because I would always take photos of my family,
but I
was never in them. Yeah. And that has really, it sounds like such a simple thing to do, such a simple change, but I think it really has kind of deepened my memory of things, and hopefully will do when we get home and go through the thousands of photos we've taken. But
I agree. I think that's really important. Because usually I travel just with my son, and I have millions of photos of him. But in the last, last year especially, I was really conscious of getting photos of both of us. Partly for his sake. I want him to remember that I was there too, I was the one who went to all this effort to take him traveling. But it's our memories, and, those, they're often just kind of rubbishy selfies, but it's a real memory moment. And you look at it, I can remember, where we were and what we were doing and how we felt, and, we're usually happy. And I just think those are, I think they're important moments that, especially women or mothers, I think we often miss ourselves out of those situations. So.
Absolutely. I'd read a few articles about that, and it kind of gave me that pang in my gut, that pang you get when something's kind of out of alignment.
Yep.
And that was something that I tried to rectify. I really was quite uncomfortable initially. I don't much like getting my photo taken, but that's been one of the things that has both surprised me and has also tapped into this idea of slow travel, rather, when the travel isn't actually slow.
Yeah. Oh, I agree that I think you can kind of live a slow travel method, even if you are moving quite quickly. I agree. It doesn't have to be somewhere for a full fortnight or a month or something.
I think there's practical things that you can do that can help with that as well. So we road tripped through the States on the book tour, and I think we took one flight. But so what we did in the beginning was to buy an esky and, to kind of stock up on decent food, and to always have enough food with us, so that when we arrived at our next Airbnb, we could make dinner, and that sort of thing. Because I feel like actually one of the things that I really have discovered is that eating out for every meal really gets fun. Really old really fast.
Yeah.
I crave salads. I crave home cooked simple meals.
I know it seems like a blessing, because we won't have to cook for the family, and then you don't get to eat what you want.
No, exactly. Yeah. And talk about like a privilege problem, but that has been something that I've very much enjoyed finding space for, cooking good food wherever we happen to be. So, you could do things like that, which I think help alleviate some of that feeling of fastness from even the quickest of trips or the most hectic of itineraries. But then also letting go of expectations that it's always going to look like that. Because we certainly had our fair share of, highway meals.
Well, you're in America, you have to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's part of the culture.
Exactly.
No, but that's true. I think, and then you learn to appreciate some of the things that you're going to experience when you eventually come back home as well. So there's
that's exactly
pros and cons of everything. Yeah. Now, we touched on it earlier, but I am keen to just pick up a couple of more ideas about traveling with the kids. So they've been doing distance education, right?
They have, yeah.
And that's been,
which has been fantastic.
Fine, yeah. Oh, how does that work these days? So when I went to Europe aged 9, decades ago, I did distance education as well. I still remember clearly what my teacher looked like. His name was Mr. Woodward, and I had a black and white photo of him, but, I'm not that old, but that's just the photo they gave me. And I'd met him. I know, it's terrible, isn't it? My sister had a teacher who had a colour photo, so colour photos did exist then. But I can picture him so clearly to this day, even though it was just like correspondence going back and forth, and maybe every month or so we'd have my dad knew a few people who worked for the bank in various cities in Europe, and that would be our next address, and then we would pick stuff up. But I imagine these days it's really different. Can you just give me a quick rundown on how it works for your kids?
Yeah, so they still send out physical packets of work, and because we're overseas, they decided to send us a term's worth at a time. So as long as we had some kind of general delivery postal address that we could get it sent to, 4 times a year, then that was fine. So they'd send out 10, 11 weeks worth of work, and then Ben and I just facilitate the day-to-day. So, it's broken up into, like it would be at school, English, maths, literacy, handwriting, PDH, PE, creative arts, and not every week has a module for every subject except for maths and English, things like that.
Of course, yeah.
We experimented at the beginning of the year to see how it would work structurally. Would it be best if one of us teaches both kids? Would it be better if we divide and conquer? And in the end, that's the way we did it. So we last year, the kids were both in different stages, which meant there wasn't any crossover with their work. This year, they're in the same stage. So I'm finding that we can do a lot of crossover and we can teach them together. At the same time, which makes an enormous difference.
I bet.
Yeah. And then it's just, at the end of the week, you finish the work that's been given and you use an app on your phone to scan their work. You upload it to Google Classroom and the teachers mark it.
No way.
And you get your results or any feedback or any suggestions for exercises or things to kind of focus on with the kids in the coming weeks, and you get that by maybe Monday or Tuesday of the next week.
Oh my goodness.
You go like that. And they have a Zoom call most weeks to talk about something that the stage kids are all working through together, often maths or English.
Yeah, sure.
There's a lot of video resources that they send through, and a lot of PDFs, things like that.
Right.
But they still send physical library books. They send the little countdown magazines that the kids get at school. They get all of that sort of stuff.
That's awesome.
It's been actually
Have the kids
fantastic.
enjoyed it?
That's a good question. People often ask our kids that, and our daughter will say, I preferred public school. And I'm like, you say that now, but when you can't go skiing from lunchtime on a Tuesday.
Yeah, you might change your mind.
No, I think they, for the most part, they have enjoyed it. But I had visions, and this is why I try not to have expectations, because I had visions of the kids just loving it and us loving it, and we just extend this trip out
forever,
live nomadically forever. And within about 6-9 months, it became abundantly clear that was not going to be the case, because the kids they enjoyed it, and they do enjoy it, and they're doing well. Their teachers have been pleased with the way they're learning, but it's not something that I think they'd be keen on doing forever, which is fine, because as I mentioned, I've also learned that there's inputs and outlets in our home, like life at home in Australia, that I think the kids benefit from too.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I think they're at the perfect age though to be doing this. I mean, basically they're the same age as my son, and I can imagine doing it with him. They're still at the age where they think their parents are the most amazing creatures on earth, and just around the corner from the time that they hate us. So,
Exactly. They still like to be with us, which is really nice, and we're kind of it for them. Like they have friendships and they have, external family relationships, but our little core unit is still
the most important part. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah, but give it a couple more years and it won't be that way. And so it's a great time to be doing it. Yeah. Yeah.
I
But
think
they're old
that-
enough to be independent and to be able to learn, you know, from you without too much hassle. You know, you don't have to teach them the
Exactly.
basics and stuff. So, yeah.
Exactly. I don't know that I would have done as good a job if they were younger. Just because I'm not an educator, you know,
Exactly,
that's
yeah.
not my background. And while all of the materials are given to you, you still need to communicate to your kids. And it's been actually such a gift to see them in that light, because they you know, they learn in totally different ways to the way I learned, just individually, you know, the way they absorb information,
their own learning
and
styles.
process it. Yeah. And it's to understand that about them, I think, is going to hold us in really good stead in the years to come, even when we're not teaching them or not responsible for, you know, facilitating to them. Just to be able to understand what makes them tick, what buttons to not push, what buttons, you know, can help by pushing them. And I think that's something that's going to really be a massive benefit for us. And you just learn more about people. Like, I'm learning about them as their own individual person, you know, and the way that they cope with challenges and what they do when they're feeling, you know, insecure in something, or what they're doing when they feel confident. And that has been really wonderful.
Oh, I can just imagine, for your like interpersonal relationships, for the four of you, it's such a strengthening time to be spending, you know, more than a year, just the four of you, really. Like, that's just going to stand you in such good stead for the future.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, one of my sisters did a 12-month loop around Australia with her 5 kids, and they aged, amazing. I mean, really, they ranged in age, twins who were 2 years old up to their eldest, who was, I think, in year 4 at the time. And we spoke a lot about it before Ben and I left. She said that was one of the things that has continued, like the benefit to this time, that the time that they spent together has been felt throughout the last 10 years.
Wonderful.
You know, they enjoy being with each other. I mean, they're a normal family, of course, and you know, rub each other the wrong way constantly, but they still seek out each other's company. And she said the thing that had surprised her the most, and I have seen it in our kids, was, I'm not sure if it's removing the kids from the social structures that, you know, they were part of, or what, if it's timing or age, but the kids have had this opportunity to get to know who they are themselves too, you know, warts and all, and to really start to own that. And I've seen it particularly in our daughter, who's nearly 10, this increasing confidence in who she is as an individual, and why she's great. You know, she doesn't need to fit into a mold in order to be happy, or in order to, you know, to have value or worth. She has that innately in herself, and that has been like amazing.
That's an amazing lesson to learn at that age. I mean, I feel I learned that, you know, when I was like 25, 26, 27,
Absolutely.
and moved to Japan, and I didn't have to, you know, act the way other people expected me to act because nobody knew me, and so I could just be me. But I was already, you know, in my mid-20s, so for her to learn that at the age of 9 is brilliant. What a great life skill. What a gift.
And that's it. I mean, I'm eternally grateful, if for nothing else, than for that lesson for both of our kids, but particularly for her, given her age. And
yes, as a girl of that age, I imagine that's so valuable to be away from her peers for that for me, extended time.
That's when all of that confidence stuff crumbled for me at around her age. And I still deal with that, you know, and I'm 30. How old am I? 37. You know, and so I it's my hope. I mean, again, we don't know what the future holds, but it's my hope that at least that sense of self will carry her through.
Yeah.
You know, with resilience. And I think that's the other thing that has blown my mind, to see the kids' resilience in different ways start to really develop, which I think is probably one of the most important things we can do as parents, is to teach our kids resilience.
Definitely.
Learn it ourselves as well. But
yes, exactly. But I think that's also such an amazing life skill, that being in unusual places and different situations, and it really is a good way to learn about that, I think, and much nicer than learning it in the playground with people picking on you or something.
Right, exactly. Which, you know, it's going to happen.
It happens, But if they can get a bonus resilience boost from this first, then
exactly,
that's wonderful. Yeah. Oh my gosh, so many learnings. I just, yeah, I'm very envious of your long time away. So from here, what's the plan, or what does travel or life look like for you in the future?
So I think we will be, I mean, so travel in general will always be a part of our lives, I think. But it's surprised me how much I have craved just in the last 4 weeks or so, really starting to crave that sense of home. You know, I think
as in a permanent base kind of thing.
Yeah, and I use the word home kind of hesitatingly then, because part of this whole trip was how can you develop a sense of home without the certainty of a permanent base? You know, is home where we are together? And the answer for this past year has been yes, absolutely. But like I mentioned before, having the ability to miss people and to miss those inputs into our lives and to really gain a sense of gratitude and perspective on how important they are has meant that just in the last little while, as that's really started to settle in on us, we're kind of craving that sense of connection, you know, in terms of being closer to some of our people. Yeah, so I mean, we'll definitely be heading home this year. And I think that we have a certain level of anxiety about that because we sold our house before we left, and knowing that we didn't want, like, that was not where we wanted to be when we came back. But like, that's a big question then. So where do we want to go? If we could go anywhere, where would we go?
It's almost a bigger choice than deciding to leave. Because when you leave, that's fine. You're going somewhere and, you know, there's no big permanent decisions to be made. But when you're coming back, you know, settling back in is hard enough. But to have to settle back in and kind of decide where we're going to live, what kind of style, you know, where the kid's going to go to school, all of that, I mean, you know, I always talk a lot about reverse culture shock. And, you know, that's one of those kind of issues that you're going to be it'll be quite a shock to return. There's good and bad, but it'll be a big shock.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to the return so that we can connect and, you know, see people we haven't seen and have conversations that we've wanted to have. But the re-entry is going to be very bumpy. I'm quite sure of that, just because we've been the four of us, you know, we've had our own adventures and we've had to not worry about kind of
anything
living
else.
in the exactly. Yeah. You know, I that makes me sound selfish, but that's sort of what it's been like.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. So that, I mean, big old question mark, to be honest, over the future, except to know that travel is such a privilege and a gift that we're lucky enough to be able to experience. And I think that we will definitely still have more of it to go. But I think that we're all really looking forward to having a bit of a base for a while.
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
But scary.
Yeah, exactly. It is just sort of smack bang in the middle between those two emotions, which is great. That's life, you know. Big emotions.
Absolutely, that's right. Yeah. And just, you know, you will always have this year plus together. And I think the family history and the family stories that you build in that time will stand you in good stead for so much in the decades to come.
Absolutely. And I was just thinking about that. I mean, there are things that we have learned as a family just in the past 12 months that have become almost family mottos. So we took the kids for a snowshoe in the Rockies just after Christmas. And we thought, okay, let's just hike out to this lake, Chester Lake. It sounds like a lovely, friendly hike. I looked it up and it was safe and there was no avalanche danger. And they said it was, you know, challenging but family friendly. It was like an uphill grind.
Oops.
Yeah. And we got kind of, I don't know, we didn't know how far it was, but we ended up pushing through it, and we were about 500 meters from the lake, from the destination. And I was saying to our daughter, we're nearly there. We can do hard things, and you're doing something hard. And she's like, I just want to get to the car park. We're nearly there. Like, oh, darling, we're only halfway.
Oh, no.
She just crumbled. And, you know, you let them have their moment, and then, okay, I understand that you're tired, but we can do hard things. And we made it out to the lake, and it was wonderful, freezing cold, but wonderful. Such an amazing thing. I'm so glad we pushed through. And then, of course, the return was, it felt like a skip down the hill.
Oh, good. Right.
Yeah. No, it was much easier.
Right, good.
And everyone was happy because we were heading to the car. But that alone, just that one outing has turned into, you know, a family motto. We can do hard things. And
Wonderful.
I think that kind of stuff is just going to, to form the fabric of our family like forever from now on.
Absolutely. That investment will give its returns for many, many years to come. That's beautiful. Well, there you go. That's what it's like to spend over a year on the road with your family. And I'm very curious to hear what other families, or even other non-families, other people have, if they've had similar experiences by being, living that nomadic life and being away from quote unquote home longer term. It's different these days to how it was when I did the same thing. It's not that long ago. It's sort of 15, 16 years ago, but technology has made it very different in many cases, although, as Brooke pointed out, they have kind of deliberately tried to be, or not deliberately, perhaps it just happened that way, to be a bit less in communication. So it's a bit more like what we might consider the good old days. It also was really interesting to hear Brooke's reflections on what her kids have learnt from this experience. It sort of made me reflect more on what I learnt as a 9-year-old when we spent 6 months away camper vanning around Europe. It was a very not quite slow travel, but very budget travel, kind of see the local sites, not necessarily full-on touristy kind of experience. And I wonder, it's too long ago and I was too young at the time to really probably appreciate the changes that it made in me. But I wonder, did it contribute to confidence and resilience and some of these other kind of useful characteristics I've carried through life? Of course, we can never know, but for sure. But I certainly think that travel certainly did me no harm at all, and I'm sure it's done Brooke and her family no harm at all either. So thank you very much for listening to episode 130 of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. A big thank you again to the Scrubber wash bag people for their awesome sponsorship. Don't forget to go to thescrubber.com and use Amanda15 for a 15% discount on any of their fabulous products. You might also want to look up Brooke's website. She's at slowyourhome.com. I'll also leave a link in the show notes to her awesome book, Slow. And, of course, you can listen to the Slow Home podcast wherever you're listening to this podcast, and I highly recommend it. It's one of those podcasts I very regularly enjoy listening to, always interesting stuff. And even though she's talking about simple living and stuff, those kind of topics, I think there's often an overlap to thoughtful travel, or at least that whole kind of being thoughtful and mindful about how you live your life and being intentional about what you choose to do with your time. So I imagine that quite a lot of you will appreciate, and probably I think there's already quite a few listeners out there I know who listen to the Slow Home podcast already. I'll also leave a link in the show notes to the first time I talked to Brooke about slow travel, which is over 2 years ago now. Yes, I'm just trying to remember, what year is it now? Over 2 years ago, back in episode 44, when we talked about slow travel back then. And of course, do come along to the Facebook group Thoughtful Travellers. We have lots of awesome chats there, and do come and tell me your experiences if you have any with nomadic life and long-term travel. I'm kind of getting itchy feet, but my son is definitely going to be staying in school here, and I think that's right for him. So my long-term travel itchy feet will have to wait a few more years. But time flies, so it's all good. I'm just storing up ideas of where I'll go and what I'll do. Show notes for this episode will be at notaballerina.com/130. So thank you very, very much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.